In the vast expanse of the Galactic Empire, where 1,000 alien races bow before the crystal throne of the Zephyrian dynasty, there exists one universal truth that every being from the silicon-based quartzlings to the energy-wreathed plasmic lords understands. Humans are the weakest species in known space. They possess no natural armor like the Thrakari, no psychic powers like the Mindweavers, no energy manipulation like the Stellar Nomads. They are soft, fragile, short-lived creatures who should have been extinct within their first century of space travel. Yet somehow, impossibly, these weak humans have become the most feared warriors in the galaxy. Princess Zarathus of the Zephyrian Empire learned this truth in the most terrifying way possible, when she found herself face-to-face with a human warrior whose very presence seemed to bend reality around him. What she saw hanging from his belt that day would shatter everything she believed about strength, power, and the true nature of the species the galaxy had so gravely underestimated. This is the story of that moment, and the revelation that would change the course of galactic history forever. Princess Zarathus floated 3 feet above the polished obsidian floor of the war chamber, her crystalline form pulsing with the soft blue light that indicated deep concentration. Around her, the holographic battle displays showed the current state of the Outer Rim Rebellion, each red dot representing another system that had dared to defy her father's empire. "Foolish insects," she whispered, her voice creating harmonic resonances in the crystal walls. "Do they truly believe they can stand against the might of Zephyr?" Her advisor, General Kethmore, materialized beside her in his usual cloud of purple smoke. The Umberling was one of the few beings she trusted completely, having served her family for over 3 centuries. His shifting form rippled with concern as he spoke. "Your Highness, there is something you must know about this rebellion. The intelligence reports indicate they have acquired human mercenaries." Zarathus almost laughed. Her form flickered between solid crystal and pure energy, a sure sign of amusement among her species. "Humans? Those soft little creatures? Kethmore, surely you jest. What could beings who die from falling downstairs possibly do against our forces?" "That is what we believed as well, my lady, until Proxima Station." The princess's glow dimmed as she processed this information. Proxima Station had been their most heavily fortified outpost in the Outer Rim. Defended by an entire fleet of Zephyrian dreadnoughts and staffed with their most elite warriors, it had been considered impregnable. The fact that it had fallen 3 cycles ago was a source of great embarrassment to the Imperial Command. "The rebels had superior numbers," she said dismissively, "and they caught our forces by surprise. It changes nothing. God I am. My lady, perhaps you should review the security footage from the station's final moments." General Kethmore waved one of his smoky appendages, and the holographic displays shifted to show grainy surveillance footage from Proxima Station's command center. Zarathus watched with growing confusion as the images played out before her. The footage showed the station's final defense, with dozens of Zephyrian soldiers taking cover behind energy barriers. Their attackers were advancing through the main corridor, but something was wrong with the perspective. The attacking force seemed impossibly small. "Enhance the image," she commanded. The hologram zoomed in, and Zarathus felt her energy core pulse with shock. There, at the front of the rebel assault, were 3 figures that stood barely 6 feet tall. They moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost dance-like, weaving between plasma bolts that would have vaporized them instantly. But what truly defied belief was how they were advancing despite being vastly outnumbered. One of the humans carried what appeared to be a primitive projectile weapon, yet somehow, every shot found its target with devastating precision. Another wielded 2 curved blades that shouldn't have been able to cut through Zephyrian combat armor, yet they carved through it like crystal through mist. The third human used nothing but their bare hands and feet, moving too fast for the cameras to properly track. "This must be altered footage," Zarathus said, though her voice carried less certainty than her words suggested. "Humans cannot move like this. They cannot be this effective against our warriors." "I had the same thoughts, Your Highness, so I ordered a full investigation. The footage is authentic. Moreover, we have reports from 17 other engagements where human mercenaries have achieved similar results." The princess watched as one of the humans literally ran up a wall, using some kind of magnetic clamps on their boots before dropping down behind the Zephyrian defensive line. What happened next was almost too fast to follow. The human moved through the soldiers like a force of nature, and within moments the entire defensive position had been neutralized. "How is this possible?" she whispered. "Everything we know about humans suggests they should be among the weakest species in the galaxy. Their physical specifications are laughably inferior to almost every other spacefaring race. That is what I have come to discuss with you, my lady. Our intelligence division has been investigating human society for several months now, and what we have discovered is deeply disturbing." General Kethmore gestured again, and the battle footage was replaced by what appeared to be documentary footage from the human homeworld, Earth. Zarathus found herself looking at images of human cities, with their primitive architecture and crude technology. They appear to be exactly as we expected, she observed. Weak, soft creatures living in crude metal structures. I see nothing that would explain their combat effectiveness. Quote, look closer, my lady. Observe their recreational activities. The footage shifted to show humans engaged in various sports and pastimes. Zarathus watched with growing amazement as humans threw themselves from impossible heights with nothing but fabric wings strapped to their backs. Others dove from cliffs into churning waters far below. Still others engaged in combat sports where they deliberately inflicted damage upon each other for entertainment. By the crystal throne, she breathed. They do these things for pleasure? It gets worse, Your Highness. Watch this. The next set of images showed human military training. Zarathus watched in fascination as human soldiers carried enormous weights across impossible distances, crawled through obstacle courses designed to injure them, and practiced combat techniques that seemed designed to maximize the damage they could inflict on opponents much larger than themselves. Our xenobiologists have been studying human physiology, General Kethmore explained. What they discovered is that humans evolved on what can only be described as a death world. Their planet has gravity significantly higher than the galactic standard. The atmosphere contains a highly reactive gas that would be toxic to most species. The surface is covered with predators that hunt in packs, and the human's own ancestral history is one of constant warfare against these creatures and each other. But they seem so fragile, Zarathus protested, even as her worldview began to shift. Their skin tears so easily, their bones break, they cannot survive in vacuum. That is precisely what makes them so dangerous, my lady. Every other species in the galaxy evolved to be naturally strong or naturally gifted. We Zephyrians manipulate energy because it is our nature. The Thrakari have armor because they grew it. The Mindweavers have psychic powers because that is how their brains developed. But humans had none of these advantages. They had to learn to fight and survive with nothing but their intelligence and their willingness to endure pain. The general paused, letting this information sink in before continuing. Do you know what humans call their planet, Your Highness? They call it Earth. But in their ancient languages they had another word for it. They called it Hell, and they spent millions of years learning how to not just survive in Hell, but to thrive there. Zarathus felt her energy matrix fluctuating as she processed this revelation. Everything the Empire had been taught about humans was wrong. They weren't weak because they lacked natural advantages. They were strong because they had learned to overcome every disadvantage imaginable. Show me more of their combat footage, she commanded. For the next hour, she watched recording after recording of human warriors in action across the galaxy. Each engagement told the same story. Whether they were outnumbered 10-1 or facing opponents twice their size, the humans found ways to win. They used the environment as a weapon, turned their enemies' strengths against them, and displayed a level of tactical creativity that was simply beyond the comprehension of most species. But it was more than just their combat skills that impressed her. It was their refusal to surrender, even when defeat seemed certain. She watched one human warrior continue fighting even after losing an arm, using their own blood to blind their opponent before delivering a killing blow. Another had been shot multiple times but kept advancing, finally defeating their opponent through sheer determination. There is something else you need to know, Your Highness, General Kethmore said quietly. The humans fighting for the rebels aren't even their best warriors. What do you mean?
These are mercenaries, my lady.
Humans who fight for money or adventure. According to our intelligence, the human military keeps their truly elite soldiers in reserve on their homeworld and in their core systems. What we're seeing in the Outer Rim rebellions represents perhaps the bottom 10% of human military capability. This revelation hit Zarathus like a plasma bolt. If what she had seen was their weakest fighters, what were their strongest capable of? We need to reconsider our approach to this rebellion, she said finally, and to humanity in general. I agree, Your Highness, but there is one more thing. The rebels have sent an envoy requesting a meeting. They want to negotiate. Negotiate? They dare make demands of the Zephyrian Empire? The envoy is human, my lady, a single warrior traveling alone. He claims to have a message from the rebel leadership that could end this conflict peacefully. Zarathus considered this. Everything she had just learned about humans made the idea of meeting with one both terrifying and fascinating. If their reputation was even partially accurate, this warrior could probably kill her and half her guards before they could react. Yet the possibility of understanding these creatures better was too valuable to pass up. Very well, she decided. Arrange the meeting, but I want full security protocols in place. If this human proves hostile, I want to be prepared. Already done, my lady. The meeting is scheduled for tomorrow in the formal audience chamber. We will have 50 guards present. all armed with the latest energy weapons. As General Kethmore departed to make the final arrangements, Princess Zarathus remained floating in the war chamber, studying the tactical displays that showed the spread of rebellion across her father's empire. For the first time in her long life, she felt uncertain about the future. Everything was about to change, and she suspected that change would begin the moment she laid eyes on the human envoy who was brave enough, or foolish enough, to walk alone into the heart of the Zephyrian Empire. The formal audience chamber of the Zephyrian Palace was a monument to the Empire's power and glory. Carved from a single massive geode, its walls sparkled with natural crystal formations that had been enhanced with energy conduits, creating a display of light that had reportedly caused visiting ambassadors from lesser species to weep at its beauty. The chamber was vast enough to hold 1,000 beings, with the royal dais rising 50 feet above the main floor. Princess Zarathus had chosen this location specifically to intimidate the human envoy. She floated above her crystal throne, surrounded by her most elite guards, the Prism Warriors. Each guard stood 9 feet tall and was encased in armor that could deflect energy weapons and withstand direct impacts from small starship cannons. Their weapons hummed with barely contained power, ready to reduce any threat to subatomic particles. Remember, she had told her guards before the meeting, this creature may appear weak, but human warriors have proven themselves capable of extraordinary violence. Remain alert. The great doors at the far end of the chamber began to open with a sound like grinding mountains. Princess Zarathus felt her energy matrix pulse with anticipation as she prepared to see her first human in person. Would they be as impressive as the combat footage suggested, or would the reality prove disappointing? What walked through those doors defied every expectation she had formed. The human was tall for his species, perhaps 6.5 feet, but seemed impossibly small in the vast chamber. He wore simple clothing that appeared to be some kind of dark fabric, with no visible armor or protective equipment. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his hair was an unremarkable brown color. By any objective measure, he looked exactly like what he was supposed to be, a fragile, short-lived creature that had somehow stumbled into the galactic community. But there was something in the way he moved that immediately caught her attention. Each step was perfectly measured, his posture maintained perfect balance, and his eyes never stopped moving, cataloging every detail of the chamber, every guard position, every possible threat or escape route. This was not the casual observation of a tourist, this was the constant alertness of a predator. As he approached the dais, Princess Zarathus found herself studying his face. Human expressions were supposedly easy to read, unlike the complex energy patterns of her own species, yet she found this particular human maddeningly difficult to interpret. His features showed neither fear nor awe at finding himself in the heart of the Zephyrian Empire. Instead, he seemed almost bored, as if meeting with galactic royalty was a routine occurrence. "I am Marcus Chen," the human said when he reached the designated speaking position 50 feet from the throne. His voice was calm and measured, carrying easily through the vast chamber without any technological amplification. "I come as an envoy from the Free Worlds Alliance. You stand before Princess Zarathus, heir to the Crystal Throne and commander of the Imperial 7th Fleet," announced the court herald. "You will show proper respect." The human looked up at her with what she was beginning to recognize as typical human directness. "Your Highness," he said with a slight nod that managed to be respectful without being subservient. "I thank you for agreeing to this meeting." "Speak your message, human," Princess Zarathus replied, her voice creating harmonic echoes in the crystal walls. "But know that the Zephyrian Empire does not negotiate with rebels and terrorists. The Free Worlds Alliance prefers the term freedom fighters," Marcus said with what might have been a slight smile. "But terminology aside, I think you'll find our proposal interesting." Something about his casual confidence irritated her. This creature should be overwhelmed by the majesty of the chamber, terrified by the presence of so many armed guards, humbled by the sheer power on display around him. Instead, he seemed completely relaxed, as if he were having a conversation in some common tavern rather than addressing galactic royalty. "We know the Empire is facing some challenges in the Outer Rim," Marcus continued. "Multiple systems in rebellion, supply lines under constant attack, military resources stretched thin. The Free Worlds Alliance is prepared to offer a cessation of hostilities in exchange for certain concessions." "Concessions?" Princess Zarathus could not keep the anger from her voice. "You dare suggest that the mighty Zephyrian Empire should make concessions to a handful of rebel worlds? Mighty empires fall, Your Highness. It's happened before, it'll happen again. The question is whether this one falls gradually through endless war or transitions peacefully into something more sustainable." The sheer audacity of his words sent ripples of shock through the assembled court. Several guards shifted their weapons to ready positions, waiting for the order to vaporize this insolent creature. But Princess Zarathus found herself more intrigued than angered. No being had ever spoken to her with such casual disrespect and lived. Yet there was something about this human that made her hesitate. "You speak as if your ragtag alliance could actually threaten the Empire," she said. "Our intelligence suggests you have perhaps 50 ships and a few thousand fighters scattered across dozens of systems. We have fleets that could reduce your entire rebellion to cosmic dust." "You do," Marcus agreed. "But you'd lose a lot of ships and soldiers in the process. And then what? You'd rule over dead worlds and empty space. That's not really victory, is it? You think your human mercenaries make you invincible?" she challenged. For the first time since entering the chamber, Marcus's expression changed. The casual confidence was replaced by something harder, more focused. "Your Highness, with respect, I think you may have some misconceptions about humans." "Then enlighten me." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Princess Zarathus noticed that his hand had moved almost imperceptibly toward his belt. Not to a weapon, but to something hanging there that she hadn't paid attention to before. It looked like simple rope or cord knotted in places, nothing that should have been significant. "Do you know what this is?" Marcus asked, lifting the cord for her to see. "Some primitive human ornament?" she guessed. "In a way, yes. We call it a rosary. It's a tool for prayer, for remembrance. This particular one belonged to my grandmother." Princess Zarathus found herself confused by the sudden change in topic. "Why do you show me this?" "Because my grandmother was a remarkable woman. She survived something called the Holocaust on Earth about 800 years ago." "Do you know what the Holocaust was, Your Highness?" "I am not familiar with human history. The Holocaust was when humans systematically murdered other humans, not in war, not in combat, but simply because they belonged to different groups. My grandmother was just a child when soldiers came to her village and killed her parents, her brothers, her sisters. Killed them for the crime of existing." Marcus's voice remained calm as he spoke, but Princess Zarathus noticed that the temperature in the chamber seemed to have dropped several degrees. Her guards were shifting nervously, though she couldn't understand why. "My grandmother survived by hiding in forests, eating roots and insects, avoiding the patrols that hunted children like her for sport. She was 11 years old. For 3 years she lived like an animal, watching other children die, watching adults die, watching entire communities disappear." "Why do you tell me this story?" Princess Zarathus asked, though she found herself genuinely curious about the answer. "Because when my grandmother was finally liberated, when the killing stopped, she made a choice. She could have spent her life hating, seeking revenge, letting the darkness consume her. Instead, she chose to build. She chose to heal. She chose to make sure that what happened to her never happened to anyone else." Marcus held up the rosary again, and now Princess Zarathus could see that what she had taken for simple knots were actually small beads, worn smooth by countless hands. She carried this with her for 90 years after that. Every day she would touch each bead and remember someone who died. Not to hate them for dying, but to honor them by living. She became a teacher, then a healer, then a leader in her community. She helped build schools, hospitals, entire cities dedicated to making life better for others. "Your point being?" Princess Zarathus asked, though she was beginning to suspect where this was leading. "My point, Your Highness, is that humans don't fight because we're naturally violent. We fight because we've learned what happens when evil is allowed to grow unchecked. Every human warrior in the Free Worlds Alliance carries stories like this. Stories of ancestors who faced impossible odds and chose to survive. Stories of people who looked at overwhelming darkness and decided to be a light." Marcus took a step closer to the dais, and Princess Zarathus noticed that none of her guards moved to stop him. They seemed frozen, transfixed by something she didn't understand. "You see us as mercenaries, as hired killers fighting for money. That's not what we are. We're the children and grandchildren of people who survived things that should have killed them. We're the inheritors of thousands of years of human beings who faced extinction and said no. We don't fight because we like violence. We fight because we know that someone has to." "Pretty words," Princess Zarathus said, though she could hear the uncertainty in her own voice. "But words will not stand against the might of the Imperial fleet." "Won't they?" Marcus asked. "Your Highness, do you know what happened at the Battle of Terra Nova, when the hegemony tried to enslave the first human colony? She didn't, but something told her she was about to find out. 50,000 hegemony soldiers against 800 human colonists. Men, women, children, farmers and teachers, and doctors who had never seen combat. The hegemony expected easy victory. Instead, they found humans who would rather die than be enslaved." Marcus's hand tightened on the rosary, and Princess Zarathus saw something in his eyes that made her energy core fluctuate with an emotion she couldn't name. The colonists held out for 6 months. When the hegemony finally broke through their defenses, they found that the humans had rigged their entire settlement to explode rather than be captured. 800 people chose death over surrender, and they took 15,000 hegemony soldiers with them. Suicide attacks prove nothing except desperation, she said, but the words felt hollow. Do they? Because after Terra Nova, something interesting happened. Word spread through human space about what those colonists had done, and suddenly, every human world that faced invasion fought just a little bit harder. Every human ship that faced impossible odds fought just a little bit longer. The hegemony had expected to conquer humanity in months. Instead, the war lasted 20 years, and it ended with the complete collapse of the hegemony empire. Marcus paused, letting this sink in before continuing. That's what you're facing, Your Highness. Not mercenaries. Not rebels. You're facing an entire species that has learned, through thousands of years of surviving on a world that tried to kill us, that sometimes the only choice is to fight until you can't fight anymore, and then keep fighting anyway. The chamber had become completely silent except for the soft humming of the energy conduits in the walls. Princess Zarathus found herself staring at this unremarkable-looking human and wondering how she had so completely misunderstood what she was dealing with. "So what do you propose?" she asked finally. Marcus smiled, and for the first time since entering the chamber, he looked like what he was, a warrior who had seen too much death and was tired of it. "Peace, Your Highness, real peace. The Free Worlds Alliance doesn't want to destroy the Zephyrian Empire. We just want the freedom to govern ourselves, to make our own choices, to live our own lives. Give us that, and we'll show you what humans can do when they're building instead of fighting. And if we refuse?" Marcus's smile faded, and Princess Zarathus felt something cold settle in her energy matrix. "Then you'll learn why every other empire in galactic history that tried to conquer humanity eventually fell. Not because we're stronger than you, Your Highness, but because we're too stubborn to stay conquered." The silence in the great chamber stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Princess Zarathus found herself studying Marcus Chen with new eyes, seeing not the fragile creature she had expected, but something far more dangerous, a representative of a species that had apparently been wildly underestimated by every major power in the galaxy. "You speak of peace," she said finally, "but your actions suggest otherwise. The attacks on Imperial installations, the disruption of trade routes, the recruitment of other species to your cause. These are not the actions of beings seeking peaceful coexistence. They're the actions of beings who tried peaceful requests first," Marcus replied calmly. "The Free Worlds Alliance spent 30 years filing formal petitions with the Imperial Senate, requesting recognition as an autonomous zone. 30 years of diplomatic channels, legal briefs, and official proceedings. Do you know how many of those petitions were even acknowledged?" Princess Zarathus remained silent, though she suspected she knew the answer. 0, not 1. Imperial policy regarding the Outer Rim has been consistent. Total submission or total destruction. So we stopped asking and started taking. "And you believe this justifies rebellion against lawful authority?" Marcus actually laughed, a sound that somehow managed to be both bitter and sad. "Your Highness, with respect, humans have a saying. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. We learned long ago that some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds are impossible." He shifted position slightly, and Princess Zarathus noticed that her guards tensed. Interesting that beings trained to face starship weapons should be nervous about one unarmored human. "But I didn't come here to justify our actions," Marcus continued. "I came to offer you an alternative to the path you're currently on, because I think you're intelligent enough to see where that path leads. Enlighten me." Marcus gestured toward the great crystal walls that surrounded them. "This is beautiful. Really, your entire civilization is remarkable. The art, the architecture, the technology. In 1,000 years, humans will probably still be studying Zephyrian crystal engineering. But beauty and accomplishment don't make an empire immortal." He began walking slowly along the base of the dais, and Princess Zarathus found herself tracking his movement with growing unease. There was something predatory about the way he moved, something that suggested he was cataloging weaknesses, calculating angles of attack. The Roman Empire thought it would last forever too. So did the British Empire, the Soviet Union, the corporate hegemony, and a dozen others throughout human history alone. I imagine the galaxy has seen hundreds of empires rise and fall before humans ever reached the stars. "The Zephyrian Empire has endured for over 5,000 years, Princess Zarathus said with pride. "We have weathered countless challenges and emerged stronger each time. Have you? Because from where I stand, it looks like you're facing the same problem that destroyed every other empire in history. You've grown too large, too complex, too dependent on subjugating others to maintain your prosperity. And now you're finding out that some people won't stay subjugated. Marcus stopped directly in front of the throne and looked up at her. The question is, what are you going to do about it? We are going to crush this rebellion as we have crushed every previous rebellion. Are you? Because based on the intelligence reports I've seen, this rebellion is different from the others. It's not just one species or one system. It's dozens of species, hundreds of worlds, all united by one simple idea, that people should have the right to govern themselves. Princess Zarathis felt her energy matrix fluctuating with anger. Rights are granted by those with the power to grant them. The Empire has brought peace, stability, and prosperity to 1,000 worlds. We ask only for loyalty in return. Peace through subjugation isn't peace. It's just delayed violence. And that delay is ending, Your Highness. Not just in the Outer Rim, but throughout your empire. We have contacts in the core worlds, the inner systems, even here in the Imperial capital. People are starting to ask why they need an emperor when they could govern themselves. This was disturbing news, though Princess Zarathis tried not to show it. Imperial intelligence had reported some unrest in the core systems, but nothing that suggested organized resistance. You're lying, she said, though she wasn't entirely convinced. Marcus reached into his clothing and withdrew a small data pad. Intelligence reports from 17 Imperial worlds. Protest movements, underground publications, secret meetings, all calling for the same thing, freedom. He tossed the pad onto the steps of the dais, where it landed with a soft click that seemed to echo through the chamber. How did you acquire classified Imperial intelligence? Princess Zarathis demanded. The same way humans acquire everything, Your Highness. We asked nicely, and when that didn't work, we took it. The casual admission of espionage sent ripples of alarm through the assembled court. If the rebels had penetrated Imperial intelligence networks, the implications were staggering. Even if what you say is true, Princess Zarathis said, the Empire has the strength to suppress any rebellion. Our military is vast, our technology superior, our resolve unbreakable. Your military is vast, I'll give you that, but it's also stretched thin across thousands of systems. Your technology is superior in many ways, but it's also complex and dependent on supply chains that are increasingly vulnerable to disruption. And as for your resolve, Marcus smiled grimly. That's what we're here to test. He reached for the rosary at his belt again, and Princess Zarathis found herself focusing on the simple string of beads with growing fascination. There was something about the way he handled it, the reverence in his touch, that suggested it represented more than just sentimental value. My grandmother taught me something important, Marcus said quietly. She taught me that evil doesn't usually announce itself with dramatic speeches and grand gestures. Most of the time, evil looks like normal people making reasonable-sounding decisions that gradually make life worse for everyone else. Are you suggesting that the Zephyrian Empire is evil? I'm suggesting that any system that has to use force to maintain itself eventually becomes evil, even if it didn't start that way. The Empire may have begun with noble intentions, but look what it's become. A machine that consumes freedom and produces compliance. Marcus held up the rosary, and in the crystal light of the chamber, Princess Zarathis could see that the beads were not uniform. Some were smooth and worn, others rough and newly carved. Each one represented a story, a life, a choice that had led to this moment. Every human warrior fighting for the Free Worlds Alliance carries something like this, he said. A reminder of what we're fighting for and what we're willing to sacrifice to get it. Some carry pictures of family members killed by Imperial forces. Others carry artifacts from their homeworlds before they were pacified. I carry my grandmother's rosary because she taught me that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to give up, even when giving up would be easier. Pretty sentiment, Princess Zarathis said, but sentiment doesn't win wars, doesn't it? Because human history suggests otherwise. Every time a superior force has tried to crush human resistance, they've discovered that we have a talent for making their victory more expensive than they expected, sometimes so expensive that winning becomes indistinguishable from losing. Marcus began walking again, this time in a slow circle around the base of the dais. Princess Zarathis realized that he was positioning himself to keep all 50 guards in view simultaneously. The casual efficiency of it was deeply unnerving. Do you want to know what I see when I look at this chamber? He asked. I see the perfect symbol of everything that's wrong with the Imperial system, all this beauty, all this grandeur, all this power on display. And at the center of it, one person making decisions that affect billions of lives. No checks, no balances, no accountability. Just pure, concentrated authority. The Imperial system has brought prosperity to countless worlds, Princess Zarathis protested. Some worlds, the ones that were useful to you. But what about the ones that had resources you wanted, the ones that had strategic value? The ones that simply had the misfortune to be in your way? Marcus stopped walking and looked directly at her. The Free Worlds Alliance has detailed records of imperial pacification campaigns. Entire species relocated because their homeworlds had valuable minerals. Cultures destroyed because they refused to abandon their traditional ways of life. Children separated from their families and educated in imperial schools designed to make them forget who they were. Those were necessary measures for the greater good, Princess Zarathus said, though the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. Necessary for whom? The greater good according to whom? You see the problem, Your Highness? You're so convinced of your own righteousness that you can't see how your actions look to the people they affect. For the first time since the meeting began, Princess Zarathus found herself truly uncertain. Everything Marcus said aligned with intelligence reports she had seen, activities she had approved, decisions she had supported. But presented from this perspective, those reasonable-sounding policies took on a different character entirely. What exactly are you proposing? She asked. Autonomy for the Outer Rim systems, recognition of the Free Worlds Alliance as a legitimate government, withdrawal of Imperial forces from Alliance territory, and most importantly, a guarantee that no Imperial ship will enter Alliance space without permission. Impossible. The Empire cannot allow rebel territories to achieve independence. It would set a precedent that could tear the entire Imperial structure apart. Maybe it should be torn apart, Marcus said quietly. Maybe it's time for something new, something that doesn't require subjugating others to maintain itself. And if we refuse? Marcus's expression hardened, and Princess Zarathus saw something in his eyes that made her energy core pulse with alarm. It wasn't anger or hatred. It was something far more dangerous, certainty. Then we continue fighting, system by system, world by world, until either the Empire accepts our independence or there's nothing left of either side worth fighting for. You would destroy everything rather than accept Imperial authority. Your Highness, humans have a long history of choosing destruction over slavery. We've burned our own cities rather than let them be occupied. We've sabotaged our own industries rather than let them serve our enemies. We've fought to the death in situations where surrender would have been more logical. Marcus touched the rosary one more time, and Princess Zarathus saw his fingers trace each bead with practiced familiarity. My grandmother survived the Holocaust, but she used to tell me about the people who didn't. The ones who chose to fight in the ghettos even though they knew they couldn't win. The ones who died in concentration camps rather than collaborate. The ones who gave their lives to save strangers they would never meet. He looked up at her, and Princess Zarathus felt the weight of his gaze like a physical force. Those people didn't die because they thought they could win. They died because they thought some things were more important than winning. Freedom, dignity, the right to make their own choices even if those choices led to death. That's madness, she whispered. Maybe. But it's human madness, and it's kept us alive for hundreds of thousands of years on a planet that tried to kill us every single day. It's carried us to the stars despite having no natural advantages except stubbornness and the refusal to quit. Marcus stepped back from the dais and gave her a formal bow. Your Highness, I've delivered the message I was sent to deliver. The Free Worlds Alliance is offering you one chance to avoid a war that will cost both sides more than either can afford. You can accept our terms and help build something new, or you can reject them and spend the next decade learning why every empire in human history eventually fell. He turned to leave, then paused and looked back at her. One last thing. You asked me what I'm carrying at my belt. I told you it was my grandmother's rosary, but that's not the whole truth. Do you want to know what it really is? Princess Zarathus found herself nodding despite her better judgment. It's a weapon, Marcus said simply. Every bead on this string represents a technique, a pressure point, a way to kill someone without using any advanced technology. My grandmother made it during the war, when weapons were scarce and survival depended on using whatever you could find. He held up the simple string of worn beads, and suddenly Princess Zarathus understood why her guards had been so nervous. This unremarkable human had walked into the heart of the Zephyrian Empire carrying not just a weapon, but a weapon so subtle that 50 elite guards had failed to recognize it. She taught it to my mother, who taught it to me. It's been in my family for 800 years, passed down from one generation to the next. A reminder that humans don't need advanced technology to be dangerous. We just need to be desperate enough and creative enough and stubborn enough to keep fighting no matter what. Marcus smiled, and Princess Zarathus realized that everything she thought she knew about human weakness had been wrong. They weren't weak because they lacked natural advantages. They were strong because they had learned to turn any disadvantage into a weapon. I'll give you 1 week to consider our proposal, Your Highness. After that, the Free Worlds Alliance will assume that the Empire has chosen war, and we'll act accordingly. He turned and walked toward the great doors, his footsteps echoing in the crystal chamber. Princess Zarathus watched him go, this unremarkable-looking human who had just casually revealed that he could probably kill everyone in the room using nothing but prayer beads. As the doors closed behind him, she found herself staring at the datapad he had left on the steps of her throne. Inside that device were intelligence reports that could change everything she believed about the stability of her father's empire. Reports that suggested the rebellion in the Outer Rim was just the beginning of something much larger. For the first time in her long life, Princess Zarathus of the Zephyrian Empire was afraid, not of dying, but of living long enough to see everything she had believed proven wrong. The human warrior had carried more than prayer beads into her throne room. He had carried the future, and that future looked nothing like the past she had been raised to defend.